Welcome to the first of the 8 modules in the ASRH course for 2021. This module deals with comprehensive sexuality education. This slide deals with definitions. What is comprehensive sexuality education? CSE is a curriculum-based process of teaching and learning about the cognitive, emotional, physical, and social aspects of sexuality. It aims to equip children and adolescents with the knowledge, skills, attitudes, and values that will empower them to realize their health, well-being, and dignity, to develop respectful social and sexual relationships, to consider how their choices affect their own well-being and that of others, and to understand and ensure the protection of their own rights and others' rights throughout their lives. The International Technical Guidance on Sexuality Education, which was co-published by a number of UN agencies, including WHO, lists key concepts to be included in curricula for school and community-based comprehensive sexuality education. The concepts are listed on the slide. I will not read them out. Each of these concepts are then broken down further in terms of key points to address, key topics to address, as well as key learning objectives by age and development status. And so, for example, understanding gender, you would begin with children and then go to younger adolescents and then to older adolescents. So it's an incremental manner, taking into account stage of development and age. This slide deals with the rationale for CSE. It makes 3 points. One, that adolescents need CSE. Just like children and adolescents need information about their environments, how to cross the road, how to avoid falling into a pool of water and drowning, how to cut vegetables or fruits without cutting themselves. Just like that, they need to know about their bodies, about their emerging sexuality, about reproduction, about sexual and reproductive health, so that they can make well-informed choices and live healthy lives. Secondly, CSE has been shown, first of all, not to cause harm. It does not lead to early increased sexual activity or risk-taking behavior. And there is considerable evidence from around the world that well-designed and well-delivered sexuality education can improve knowledge, can improve understanding, can promote safe behaviors, and when combined with complementary interventions, can improve health outcomes. Thirdly, access to good quality CSE needs attention. In many places, CSE programs are in place, but their quality and fidelity need attention. Further, many young people are not in school and are not reached by sexuality education programs. Delivering CSE programs is part of the obligation of governments. CSE is part of the core obligations of states to uphold the right to sexual and reproductive health. It should address self-awareness and knowledge about the body, about sexual health and well-being. All children and adolescents should have access to CSE, which should be free, confidential, adolescent responsive, and non-discriminatory. It should be available online and in person. It should be age-appropriate, based on scientific evidence, comprehensive and inclusive. So these are very clearly set out human rights obligations that countries have signed up to in terms of international law. And finally, it should be developed with adolescents and be part of the mandatory school curriculum. This slide lays out 3 key concepts to consider. First is there's deep-seated discomfort about adolescent sexuality, which contributes to barriers to the provision of CSE. So CSE needs to be placed on national agendas and strategies in order to build support and overcome resistance. Secondly, there's widespread misconception that the provision of CSE leads to early or risk-taking behavior. there is again strong evidence, as I said earlier, that it does not lead to early or increased sexual activity or to risk-taking behavior, but this must be communicated and re-communicated. And if studies are available from the country context, that would reinforce studies available globally. And finally, teachers lack good quality training and support to deliver CSE in a participatory manner, in a non-judgmental manner. And while we talk about teachers, this is absolutely true for community-based facilitators and just as relevant for parents at home. Parents can teach mathematics, parents can teach science and social studies, and that's exactly what happened to me. I grew up in India in a loving, caring family. I got a lot of support from my parents in my studies and in everything else, but they never once talked to me about sexuality or reproduction. This slide lays out the outlines of 3 WHO guidelines which address sexuality education explicitly. WHO guidelines on preventing early pregnancy and poor reproductive outcomes among adolescents in developing countries, ensuring human rights in the provision of contraceptive information and services, guidance and recommendations, consolidated guidelines on HIV prevention, diagnosis, treatment and care for key populations. Further details are provided in this slide, and these guidelines are available on the internet and are available on request from the Geneva Foundation for Medical Education and Research. This slide is one of 2 slides containing a list of publications that are complementary to WHO's guidelines. One is the revised edition of the International Technical Guidance on Sexuality Education, an evidence-informed approach which was published by a number of UN agencies, including WHO. The second is Standards for Sexuality Education in Europe, Guidance for Implementation. The third is Evaluation of Comprehensive Sexuality Education Programs with a focus on gender and equity outcomes and rights outcomes. This slide lists 4 documents which were published last year, in the last 2 years. Youth-centered digital health interventions, a framework for planning, developing and implementing solutions with and for young people, published by WHO. Switched On, Sexuality Education in the Digital Space, published by UNESCO in 2019. The International Technical and Programmatic Guidance for Outer School CSE, published by UNFPA in 2020. And a document that was published only last year in response to the COVID-19 crisis, not on pause, responding to the ASRH needs of adolescents in the context of the COVID-19 crisis. Again, all these documents are available in the public arena. This slide contains an extract from the document Not on Pause, which I just mentioned. It sets out practical tips for policymakers, program managers in the government and the non-government sectors, as well as funders, to use to think through how to deliver CSE in the context of the closures and the disruptions that have occurred in the context of COVID-19. The last slide in my segment of the presentation, before Dr. Jamila Al-Raiby takes over, is this little cartoon which is available to you to use. It's a question in a parent-teachers meeting that often comes up, is sex education bad? Will it encourage our children to have sex? And this is clearly something that needs to be talked about again and again and again. And this is something that you will see echoed in the other materials, including the wonderful video presentation by Sheena Hadi, a champion in this area.
Thank you, Dr. Chandra, for sharing rationale, key concepts, and WHO guidelines in relation to comprehensive sexuality education. Hello, everyone. I am Jamila Al-Raiby, the Regional Advisor for Child and Adolescent Health at WHO Eastern Mediterranean region. In continuation to what Dr. Chandra shared with you, we will go together through the Eastern Mediterranean regional perspective for comprehensive sexuality education. I would like to share with you the adolescent fertility rate in the Eastern Mediterranean region to show you how much is the need for adolescent sexual and reproductive health services. The adolescent fertility rate of the region is the third highest after African and American region. Sudan and Afghanistan have the highest rate of 87 per 1,000 girls, and this corresponds to the unmet needs for family planning, including contraceptive, for this age group. The knowledge and attitude towards CSE in the region shows that there are misconceptions and gaps in knowledge of sexual and reproductive health affecting the attitude of young people. Also, young people in the region do not know how to protect themselves from sexual and reproductive health risk, nor do they have adequate access to reliable sources for information, since the schools and the parents are not prepared to provide those information. Although there is a lot of changes around the adolescence period, there is a poor knowledge of the pubertal changes and other reproductive health information among most of adolescents in the region. For attitudes, the parents' attitudes in a study in Pakistan and Oman showed that parents agree to the provision of science-based CSE in schools, and almost all parents agree that the CSE should be provided in accordance with the Islamic regulation. Teachers' attitude shows a negative attitude toward any questions from students in relation to reproductive and sexual education. And this is because they are lacking the skills how to deal with those questions. The challenges to CSE could be social cultural challenges, such as the myths about negative impact of sexuality education on adolescents, and also the stigma and the embarrassment that leads to reluctance in discussing sexual matters. Also, CSE is always perceived as a foreign models, not adaptable to our context, and also threats the religious obligation. The wide intergeneration gap as a sequence of advanced communication technology further reduces the trust between the families and adolescents seeking information from different resources. Also, the unprecedented scale of conflict and humanitarian emergencies in the region leads to disruption of families, health services, and social norms during the crisis, and leaves the adolescent without access to services, including sexual and reproductive health services and information. Challenges related to policy and programmatic challenges is the lack of coordination between the national authorities and NGOs and other stakeholders working with adolescents and sexual and reproductive health issues and services. Also, failure of effective policy dialogue with the policymakers, and also to make legal reforms that support access to services for adolescents. Lack of monitoring and evaluation of the programs, which resulted in lack of reliable and quality data, especially for the age group from 10 to 14 years old. Also, the financial constraints. Many countries depend on the foreign aids to support adolescent health, including sexual and reproductive health. And there is a very minimum from the domestic resources to support these services. And this is an issue and a challenge for sustainable services for adolescents. In spite of the challenges, there are successful experiences at a country level. Among these experiences, the Egyptian Family Health Society, which provides sexual and reproductive health and life skills education in the preparatory and secondary schools in 22 governorates in Egypt in collaboration with the Ministry of Education. A post-program evaluation in 2012 showed marked improvement in the level and the knowledge after attending the sessions and the parents' willingness for their children to attend those sessions. The other example is from Pakistan. The AHANG, which is an NGO, aims to improve the quality of sexual and reproductive health services while advocating for enabling environment. AHANG Life Skills-based education program is a comprehensive curriculum. It focused on building core life skills, supporting communication, decision-making, and negotiation. And we see that in those two contexts of Egypt and Pakistan, there is some progress around this area. It is a similar context to the most of the region, countries in the region. So if it works in those countries, it can work in other countries. What are the lessons learned for changing attitude towards CSE in the region? We have to work on the deep-rooted social and cultural barriers within the adolescent environment in order to sensitize and engage influencers in delivering CSE for adolescents. Engagement of stakeholders, either the gatekeeper, parents, community, and religious leaders in the whole process, from the development of the curriculum to the implementation of the curriculum, monitoring and evaluation. Also engagement of adolescents, which will improve adolescent-adult relationship, develops their leadership skills, motivate and self-esteem, and also enable them to develop competencies and confidence they need to play active and positive pro-social role in the society. Scaling CSE in schools should be in collaboration with the health sector, and WHO recommends appropriate health sector representative should be informed about the CSE implementation at multiple ecological levels, policy level, community, and school level. For future perspective for CSE, we have to build on the existing opportunities, and at the regional level, we have the vision to integrate adolescent sexual and reproductive health, also the regional framework for the joint UN strategic action for adolescent and young people in the Arab states and also the Eastern Mediterranean region. Also, we have to take the opportunity of the Sustainable Development Goals, where the youth targets such as SDG 3 for ensuring healthy lives and promote well-being for all stages, SDG 4 ensuring inclusive and equitable quality education and promote lifelong learning opportunities, and SDG 5 to achieve gender equality and empower all women and girls. The second thing is implementing a successful CSE programs, and implementation of such a program should be adopting evidence-based intervention at a policy, community, and school levels. We know that the terminology is not accepted in many settings, and whatever is they call this program, but it should be work on evidence-based intervention. We have to ensure enabling environment, and this include enabling policies, supportive culture, norms and values, and infrastructure. The other model for the CSE is the collaborative module between the education and the health sector, and also to facilitate the evidence-based, age-appropriate, and skill-based sexual and reproductive education in school curricula. And this is to encouraging the development of and adaptation of the curricula, teacher training and retaining, jointly reviewing the accuracy of information and appropriate of skills-based training, and also to support out-school comprehensive sexuality education. The coordination should be in the implementation and also in monitoring and evaluating the implementing program. Thank you.